Well, happy Halloween, my movie peeps. The wolves are a-howling, the guy from the Thriller video's laughing, and we are gonna be watching horror movies. And well, this year we've had a lot of horror movies come out. So many I haven't had the time to see them all when they were being released and give you individual reviews. I've gotten to most of the major releases, but here in this video I'll be talking about different horror movies released in 2024. Some of these movies I flat out loved and are gonna be ending up on my top 3 horror movies of this year, while others I wish I never took the time to sit down and watch. I'll be putting timestamps in the description if there's a horror movie you really want to hear me talk about, but it's Halloween. Sit back, relax, get in the spooky mood, and let's talk some spooky movies. And well, starting off strong with a horror movie I really wish I did not sit down and check out. This is definitely going to be the worst horror movie on this list, so let's just get it out of the way. Halloween's Carved. Now, I actually loved what Hulu is doing now every year, where they have pre-planned a couple of horror movies to release on their platform, all with like fun premises that get you in the mood for the spooky season. Only problem is, they don't really seem to be that good.
I'm tripping balls, man!
But man, do I wish it was, because looking at the premise for Carved, we are going with a small town, and they're having a big Halloween celebration, mainly because the town got in trouble earlier in the year for dumping toxic waste in the river and making a lot of people in the town very sick. Well, it wasn't just the people. This toxic waste ended up growing a mutated pumpkin that'll actually come to life during this Halloween festival and start taking down anybody who is carving a pumpkin for Halloween. Like, that should be an awesome, basic, dumb, fun premise. I know just from hearing that, it's probably not going to be an amazing movie, but if it's Halloween and you're serving me up a platter of a movie with a killer pumpkin, oh, I expect that to at least be entertaining. It was everything but that.
This is how we celebrate pumpkins. We love pumpkins.
Unfortunately, the movie Carved suffers from a lot of issues, one of them being not having any likable characters. Almost every single actor in this movie is just not doing a great job with their line delivery, and I don't even think it's their fault, because the material they're given for this to be a horror comedy, the comedy is not coming out. It is just not a very funny movie, super outdated. Like, this is the kind of movie that if you saw with a packed theater, after every joke, there'd be awkward silences.
There's kind of a killer pumpkin on the loose.
Honestly, the only moment in this movie that was actually worth watching is the first 3 minutes of this pumpkin coming to life and taking down a bunch of people during a Halloween pumpkin carving contest. So if you at all are like me and you hear the premise of a killer pumpkin and are like, maybe Chris is exaggerating, it can't be that bad, just watch that scene, get it out of your system, and do not waste your time with the rest of this movie. I'm giving Carved 1 pumpkin. Next up, we have a movie entitled Amber Alert. This movie stars Everybody Hates Chris, aka Tyler James Williams, and Hayden Panettiere from the Scream franchise. And like you would suspect from the title, it does deal with an Amber Alert. 2 strangers, one of them being an Uber driver, picks up a passenger when they get an Amber Alert on their phones and realize the car they're talking about in the alert is right next to them. From here, these people who became strangers must now work together to try and save whatever child is being kidnapped. And look, I'm just gonna tell you straight off the bat, this is another movie where, man, that is a premise I dig. I totally get why it didn't get a theatrical release, but I'm also surprised it didn't go straight to a streaming service, because I feel like this is almost the perfect kind of streaming movie. It's the kind of movie you watch and sit down with a partner or friend and think, all right, how would we react in this situation if we saw the car that the Amber Alert was talking about was right next to us? And I think for the most part, it does what you're expecting with the premise. I had a good enough time with this movie, but also they just didn't do enough with the premise. There's only so far you can take it once you get to a certain point, since these are just 2 regular civilians.
If we don't find him, she'll be gone forever.
The police does get involved, and that's where the movie does get a little convoluted and starts stretching what would actually happen in this situation. Plus, there's also a frustrating factor in the movie where the characters make some dumb decisions that could have ended the movie a lot sooner, and that is going to make some people mad, but it's for plot reasons, so we can keep the movie an hour 30 minutes long and not be over within 30 minutes. Aside from the premise, the other reason I wanted to see it is because of the two stars of the film, because I like both Tyler Williams and Hayden Panettiere. There's a really great moment towards the end of the movie where they kind of explain why they felt so passionate about going after saving this child that they knew nothing about, and I felt like it was the biggest highlight of the movie. Just wish the rest of it kind of maintained that level of emotion and depth. I give Amber Alert 2 pumpkins out of 5. Blink Twice follows a tech billionaire named Slater King, played by Channing Tatum, who invites a waitress named Frida and her friend Jess to his private island for a weekend getaway. But once they get to the island, they start to notice suspicious activity, they're losing memories, and they soon start to realize something way more sinister is going on. Now, Blink Twice was one of those movies that I did hear about. I remember seeing the trailers when it was coming out, but I honestly had no interest in it.
Wake up! Wake up! Wake up!
And well, I was wrong, because this ended up being one of those horror movies you guys demanded I check out and talk about. And after watching it, I can understand why. I wouldn't say I love the film or think it's phenomenal, but there was definitely a lot more going on than I suspected. This being Zoe Kravitz's directorial debut, I do think she did a good job, because not only do I think the film is shot well, it has an engaging pace to it where you are wanting to uncover what exactly is going on. And I was real caught off guard by how far the movie takes some of the sequences, because yeah, trigger warning for anybody with sexual assault. I did not expect that as part of the movie. A lot of the times movies more imply that kind of stuff than flat out show it, and this is one of those movies that didn't shy away from that. The film also has a twist that I didn't see coming and did leave me a little shocked.
There's something wrong with this place.
I will say the biggest drawback though is I think the ending of the movie. I felt like it got a little cheesy, and for as dark as it was being, it held back on that at the last moment. But overall, pleasantly surprised to where I ended up enjoying it when I thought it would be something I didn't even come out liking. I'm gonna give Blink Twice 3 pumpkins out of 5. Now, Lowlifes is a Tubi original, the free streaming service that has all sorts of weird movies that you can watch with a couple of ads in between. I never would have thought I'd be talking about a Tubi original movie and actually be a movie I'm highly recommending to people, unless it was me being completely sarcastic about an awful movie that ended up being so bad it's good again. But no, Lowlifes is just good.
Why are you doing this?
Something awful in this house.
This is one of those movies where I'm going to be very vague on the plot and premise, because it's one of the things that'll surprise you the most when going into this movie. But the basic setup is a family goes camping out in the farmland when out of nowhere they are approached by a couple of people who live in this farm town and are starting to rub the family the wrong way. That's all I'm going to say for now. But as the plot continued on with this thing, I loved where it went. I loved everything about this family. The dynamic between them, I found it to be the most interesting. Not just that, but this is a movie that I think has a good amount of gore. It's not all that bloody and gory, but whenever someone does get taken down in this movie, they don't shy back. I think there's a whole sequence of someone's eye getting taken out with a fork, and what proceeds after that is just as disgusting.
I get the distinct impression we're not wanted here.
So what you got in there anyway?
Well, that's our business, none of yours.
I don't think this will end up being a movie that'll be considered the best of the year, but this for sure is going to be an underrated gem that most people didn't know about, didn't hear about, of course, because it was a Tubi original. But it's one I would highly recommend you put on your list just to give it a chance. I'm giving Lowlifes 4 stars out of 5. So with Daddy's Head, we are following a boy who has just lost his father and is left in the care of his stepmother. Both the boy and the stepmother are now mourning the loss of this dad when out of nowhere, this shape-shifting creature appears to the boy resembling the face of his father, creating a complicated situation for both the boy and the stepmother. Now, Daddy's Head is one of those Shudder originals that was being branded as the scariest movie of this year. That has worked for a lot of horror movies in 2024, mainly Longlegs. But what always happens whenever something is branded the scariest movie of the year? It almost never lives up to that potential, and most of the time you end up shooting yourself in the foot because you set such a high expectation. Even if the movie is good because it wasn't the scariest movie of the year, you're left feeling a little underwhelmed. And I gotta admit, I think that's kind of what happened to me when watching Daddy's Head. Now, don't get me wrong, I do like this movie. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think this premise of a boy seeing the shape-shifting creature that resembles his father was a really unique way about tackling grief and everything this boy is going through, because the movie plays on that. The whole time the kid thinks this is literally his dad, and he doesn't want to believe the stepmom that it's not, and how far the kid goes into wanting to believe that's its dad.
He's in the forest, hiding in trees.
Also, even really like the situation the mother in the movie was put on, because she has no biological connection to this kid. And now she has this decision to make where she is the widowed bride, so she can take all the money from the father's death, but also put the kid up for adoption because it's not really her kid. She was married to the guy for about a year or two, has only known the kid that long. Is she prepared then to take this child for the rest of its life, raise it as her own with the father no longer there? Like, I just found that also very interesting in itself.
Give it time.
He's barely spoken to me since we got married.
It will come.
The main drawbacks to Daddy's Head is, I think, the lack of scares in the movie. There is a lot of in-between time with this creature. It doesn't get to show up a lot. For a movie that was being branded as really scary, it didn't have as many scares as I would like. There's one or two jump scares that did get me, but for the most part, it's a very tame movie with not a lot going on in between. I was captivated by the characters and story going on, but I did leave it a little underwhelmed. I liked the ending a lot, but even the ending felt rushed. I'm gonna give Daddy's Head 3 stars. Your Monster is the latest movie starring Melissa Barrera, following a woman named Laura who has recently gotten into a nasty breakup, and right when her life was starting to tumble all the way down, the monster in her closet from her childhood reappears, trying to help her get her life back together in some of the most oddest ways. Now, I do want to say straight up, I know this is a horror movie list, and this will probably be one of the movies that is least like a horror movie. It's being branded as a horror comedy, and there are some horror elements to it, mainly the beast aspect, but aside from that, not a lot of horror going on, just to tame some expectations. Overall, I was obviously very interested in this because I want to support Melissa Barrera. While looking at the trailers and even the premise of the movie, you think it's going for almost like a modern day Beauty and the Beast situation, but it's different than that.
I really need a hug right now.
I don't know if I'm...
I really needed that.
It has those elements for sure, but it does something different. And I actually really loved Melissa Barrera's performance in here because it's nothing like what we've seen of her before. She honestly plays this very pathetic but funny character I couldn't help to laugh at throughout the movie. The monster as well was a character that really grew on me. At first, I found the monster a little bit annoying, but as things unraveled and the way they used the monster as part of the story, I really dug. What's probably going to be the most interesting thing if you're someone curious and wanting to check out more information about this movie is it is being branded as a true-ish story. And that was the part I was kind of most curious about, because obviously monsters in closets, like, they're not a real thing. But when everything is said and done by the end of the movie, it really put the whole movie in a different perspective, and it ended up making me like the film a lot more than I was expecting. I'm giving Your Monster 3.5 pumpkins. The Oddity is a Shudder original that follows Darcy, a woman who is blind and lost her twin sister the previous year. She's hell-bent on finding out who and why her sister was killed, returning to the house it happened to with a wooden puppet. So The Oddity was one of those other movies that was also being branded the scariest movie of the year. I was already starting to roll my eyes back, cross my arms, and go, oh boy, here we go again. But you know what? Although I'm not gonna agree scariest movie movie of this year, it definitely had a very creepy, eerie feeling throughout most of the runtime. There's a wooden puppet that gets used for a couple of jump scares throughout the movie, and while they didn't get me jumping, they're the type of scares where your body takes a screenshot. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that kind of like sinking butterfly feeling you get when watching a horror movie, I got that a couple of times here from those jump scares, and that's kind of even more frightening than just jumping.
Just open the door. I am telling you that there is someone in there with you.
The premise I was also super in love with. This twin sister really just wants to get to the bottom of her sister's murder, and there's some twists and turns along the way. You think the story and the outcome went this way, then you find out some information and realize it goes this way. At one point, it does end up becoming predictable on what really happened, but the journey to get to that revelation and how things went down, really solid horror movie. The only drawbacks I do have to the Oddity is it takes a while to get going. You are left in the dark and confused on what's going on for a large part of the movie, and since this is streaming, I think some people might check out or just go on their phones, and you're gonna miss a lot of things that'll become important later on in the movie. That, and I think they stretch the premise as far as it goes. Once you start to uncover and realize what actually happened, you can start to feel the movie kind of stretching its runtime to meet the standard, hour 30-minute mark.
My sister would never allow a strange man into her home in the middle of the night.
But overall, really cool movie, and I think it was mainly the atmosphere of this movie that really had a creepy tone throughout it. I'm gonna give the Oddity 4 pumpkins out of 5. Azrael is another Shudder exclusive that stars Samara Weaving, my immediate reason for wanting to check this out, and it's set years after the apocalypse. Most of the people on Earth have been taken to heaven, and those who are sinners have been left behind to waste on Earth, leaving Azrael and the cult she was once attached to hunting her down in the middle of the woods for an unknown sacrifice. Now, the thing that actually intrigued me about this movie, other than having Samara Weaving, who I do think is a scream queen, was the gimmick that there was no dialogue as part of this movie. Now, some people find that as a drawback, or they think, oh, I don't want to watch it, I need some dialogue. But I feel like something like that could work real in favor of the movie, where you're focused on performances, visuals, and the needed creativity to be able to tell a story without saying a word. Like, to me, I'm like, if you can pull that off, that is awesome. And I think Azrael only half pulls that off. There is a real frustrating factor to this movie, because after a certain point, you are just wanting them to speak and explain a couple of things that are not being made clear in the movie. And I think that was the biggest drawback. Not to say it's a hard movie to understand. The movie cuts itself in intervals of quotes from the Bible, and those quotes give you a lot of context to what's actually going down in the story, so that's helpful. But the other part I was kind of let down with the movie is this cult and the creature designs. There's these cult of people that are trying to round up sinners, tie them down, and sacrifice them to this creature lurking in the woods. And from the trailers, I really went crazy trying to imagine, oh, what do these creatures look like? What are they gonna be? And it's really just people covered in like black paint. It felt so low budget, and that's unfortunately the feeling I got, that the movie felt a little cheap at the end of the day. They had cool star power with Samara Weaving, but everything else about the movie just felt like actors meaning around in the woods. I really wanted to end up liking this one more than I did, but I just couldn't get there. I'm giving Azrael 2.5 pumpkins out of 5. Time Cut is the latest Netflix original horror movie that I was dying to check out, mainly because the premise deals with a teenage girl from the year 2024 accidentally time travels back to the year 2003. Around the same time, a mass killer is on the loose, the same one that killed her sister decades ago. Now, yeah, me talking about that premise and even showing you this mask of the mask killer, you're going, Chris, I think we've seen this movie, and you're thinking of Totally Killer, another time-traveling slasher horror movie that premiered on Amazon Prime. Well, Time Cut was actually filmed and made 1 year before Totally Killer, but for whatever reason, it wasn't released right away. Totally Killer got made, that came out first, and now we have Time Cut. And yeah, it is undeniable the similarities between the movies in both the premise and mass killers, but this is just one of those unfortunate coincidences, not really one or the other movies copying each other. Now, with that said, no point even getting in defensive about this, because Wow, one of the biggest disappointments of this year. I wasn't just looking forward to Time Cut because it was being branded as Back to the Future meets Scream, two of my favorite movies of all time being combined into one film, yes please, but also it was because it was a story by Michael Kennedy, who also wrote the movie Freaky. That's with Catherine Newton and Vince Vaughn, directed by Christopher Landon, a horror movie I thought was actually really funny and delivered on being an entertaining slasher. Then he went on to write It's a Wonderful Knife, a Christmas slasher that had such a cool looking villain in all white, starred Justin Long, and well, unfortunately that movie was a disappointment to me. I don't think the movie as a whole was all that bad, but it really didn't deliver. And now we're on to Time Cut, and man, it only got worse from there. I don't even know where to begin on the issues with this movie. One of the biggest things though is the way they handle the nostalgia and going back to the year 2003. I have no problem with that being the year. Most movies nowadays go to the 80s or even the 90s now. I think it's kind of cool that we're getting into an era where we're nostalgic of the early 2000s because I grew up in that time, so I remember it. And there were a little bit of things in here where I was like, I remember that from my childhood. Oh, that song, it really is bringing me back to a different time. Look at that outfit. But it feels like that was kind of the only thing they were interested in doing with this movie. Most of the nostalgia and placating back to that time is done so lazily. Oh, here's a CD player. Here's a t-shirt that was spray painted on from that time. Remember this? I think also, I don't think we're far enough from the year 2000s to make it that interesting. There's a joke in here, if you can call it a joke, where a girl saves a guy from being bullied and she goes, you're lucky. In my time, we would have recorded that and put you on Twitter. And because it's 2003, the guy's supposed to be surprised, but Twitter would only then be invented 3 years later in that time period, and it just doesn't feel that distinctly where the worlds are that drastically different. But okay, there's that issue. Then none of the people are interesting in this movie. In most horror films, you want to see the main girl survive or the other characters live. I don't think you kind of want that in this movie. The dialogue is like super stiff, and it's another situation of trying to make jokes and reference things that are from the future that obviously people in the past don't know about, and none of it really works.
What is this?
It's my phone.
You call people on this?
I don't really call people, but
It's supposed to be like $1 million.
Another issue that I think Totally Killer also had was wanting to focus too much on the time travel part of it. To me, the time travel aspect of the movie should almost be kind of like an afterthought, but they build a whole machine and fuel they have to give for it, and then they overcomplicate the rules of this time machine, and all of that kind of boggles down and gets away from the horror slasher aspect. And man, the horror slasher aspect, most of the kills in here are censored, not that creative. Plus, if you know me from watching horror movies, I am sick and tired of the random mask and black hoodie killer. Give me a unique costume, baby. This was a big disappointment for me, man. I'm giving Time Cut 1.5 pumpkins out of 5. VHS Beyond is the latest horror movie in the VH franchise, this time picking up the theme of space. Aliens. I love me the VH franchise. I know not every single entry has its winners, but there is always at least one short out of all the ones they show in each VHS movie that stand out. And the last couple of movies that have come out from the VH franchise, it felt like you were really just relying on that one short and having to sit through 3 or 4 other ones that just didn't do it. With VHS Beyond, I think there was only really one story out of the entire movie I wasn't that into. I was very happy with VHS Beyond. I thought there was some really cool stuff they did, not just in terms of visuals. There's like this giant bird creature in one of the first shorts that I thought was really haunting, but also in the psychological aspect. There's this one involving a constant healing chamber, and the way it was shot and how they go about it, I thought was pretty horrifying. But probably most interesting of all, in a VH franchise where they stick to a theme of, space and aliens this time around, the best short out of VHS Beyond is one that doesn't even follow that theme. And that's the one involving the doggy daycare. I don't want to give too much away. This doggy daycare skit was really doing it for me. I was just appalled, and I almost wanted that short to be an entire movie. because that was some freaky stuff. I'm glad VHS Beyond turned out being pretty good, because if this was another entry where only one short was good out of most of them, I don't think I'd be that excited every time they announce a new VHS movie, which I'm sure another one is right around the corner. I'm giving VHS Beyond 3.5 pumpkins out of 5. Cuckoo was one of the many horror movies distributed by Neon this year, and Neon is really stepping up their game. This is the year where they've really made a name for themselves with a lot of the horror movies they were releasing, and this one stars Hunter Schafer, who plays a 17-year-old girl forced to go with her family to a resort where she starts to discover really unsettling things are happening. Now, there's a lot to enjoy with Cuckoo, but I gotta be honest with you, this is gonna be one of those horror movies where I'm just a little mixed on. There's been a lot of those this year, whether it's Longlegs, Late Night with the Devil, and now Cuckoo, where these are horror movies that just visually I think are beautiful to look at. The cinematography sets up a real nice vibe. They're filled with actors I really respect and I think give phenomenal performances and really unique and different stories. Those should be enough of the elements to make me go, oh, best horror movies of this year, but it always comes down to the story and execution for me where I'm left a little holding back. Late Night with the Devil and Longlegs are movies I appreciated more on a filmmaking level than I actually did connecting and enjoying the movie myself. And that is how I feel about Cuckoo. I did like how a large majority of the movie I was tense on the edge of my seat, wanting to figure out this mystery and these really creepy things that were in the background hunting her down, because Hunter Schafer, what a wonderful performance. The title in itself is very clever with what Cuckoo represents and the way she ends up going cuckoo throughout the movie, because she just looks like a crazy person. But it's the kind of stuff I love to see in a horror movie where the main character goes through a lot of crap. Oh, and I can't forget about Dan Stevens in his funny little accent, but great performance. But it was once everything was being revealed in what's actually going on in the island, the experimenting they're performing, what these creatures actually are, and their end goal that was very muddy to me. Didn't really feel like it made sense and honestly left me wanting more. And that's such a shame because I want to be part of this same hype level train, but I gotta be honest, when I see a movie and it just doesn't connect with me, I totally get why other people are loving it, but with the amount of love that they're getting, I'm just not there with other people yet. I'm gonna give Cuckoo 3 stars. Don't Move was another Netflix horror original that is produced by Sam Raimi. This one following a woman who is grieving the loss of her child when on a hike encounters a man that decides to inject her with a serum that within 20 minutes will start to paralyze her body. In this 20 minutes, she must get as far as she can and try to survive until the serum wears off. Now, again, another premise where I'm like, dude, I love that. That sounds awesome. There's no way you can mess this up. And look, I'm not gonna lie to you, I was kind of entertained throughout most of this movie, but not in the way you think. This is a movie where you're not going to be bored throughout it. I think it's a very engaging film and there's always something constantly happening, but it's the kind of movie that is going to frustrate you. I highly recommend you check out this movie with a friend or a partner just so you can be yelling at the screen and being mad, because that's what it seems like a lot of people are getting from this movie. It has a pretty low audience score because people are so pissed with it. And I knew about this going in, so maybe that's why my expectations were set kind of low, but I had fun with this movie. I think, yes, it has a very predictable nature to it where you know when something is being set up, when she's about to make a mistake or do something that's going to cost her her life, but I was so engaged with this movie. The woman in the film, for being someone that can't move and talk, you think that would be an easy thing to make you a likable character that you want to root for and survive, but even in the situation she's put through, she gets so unlikable by the dumb choices she makes. I kept saying out loud during watching this movie, she is the luckiest, unluckiest person in the world. Because yes, she's in a horrible situation. She's running for her life. She's paralyzed, but also she is given like 20, 30 different things that could help her survive, and she does the wrong thing every time. Finn Wittrock plays the man chasing her down, and honestly, I like the performance he gave and how sadistic and crazy he was. But in saying that, it's not a situation where it's like, oh, she's such an unlikable character, you want the serial killer to win. No, I want this guy to also get his just desserts. But it's frustrating when there's so many chances for that to happen and it doesn't go down. But while that might piss and frustrate some people, I kind of had fun with that. It was an entertaining watch. I wasn't bored at all throughout it. And I love movies where you try and put yourself in that situation going, okay, if this was me, I had this much time and I'm in this location, what would I do? I kind of dig that, but I think a lot of people have a vein popping on their forehead when watching this movie. I'm gonna give Don't Move 3 pumpkins. I Saw the TV Glow is an A24 horror movie that came out earlier in this year following 2 teenagers who obsess over a TV show called The Pinko Peck. We follow them through their childhood to adolescence, obsessing over this show to where they start to believe they are the characters in the show and they must break free from whatever curse they've been placed on. And well, just being honest with you guys, sometimes if I don't review a certain movie, it's because I don't think there's a big enough audience that will click on the film, and if there's not someone clicking, YouTube will then punish you and then not recommend your next video after that. But I Saw the TV Glow is one of those times where it's a movie I ended up loving a lot, but I knew it was going to make for such a nasty, disgusting comment section because of the material this movie is tackling.
Do you remember a TV show we used to watch together?
The Pinko Peck?
I Saw the TV Glow is a metaphor for people who are transgender. The 2 main characters, Owen and Maddie, obsess over this TV show that looks like it's heavily inspired by something like an old Goosebumps show, maybe even something out of Power Rangers. And the segments of the movie where it does focus in on that, there's like some great practical effects with like this ice cream monster, really screamed of old Goosebumps, and that just kind of hit a nostalgia chord with me, because even though I've never seen something like the Pinko Peck, which is the show that they're watching, it felt like I did see that as a kid, and I thought it was so cool that the movie could pull that from me. But once they start to feel and discover like maybe they belong in that world and they have to go through this transition to get back to where they come from, it's clear as day when watching, and the metaphor isn't subtle at all. But the thing I most liked about it, it personified something I'll never know or get to experience. I'm obviously not transgender, but to see a movie that can take that feeling, that fear, that sense of not feeling comfortable in your own skin and put it in the movie and make me understand how a person feels and why that would be so scary is exactly what movies are for. And I think that's why I ended up loving I Saw the TV Glow. And you know, aside from that, the performances of the 2 leads I thought were really great. The cinematography and look of the movie, wow, I really loved. It's probably one of my favorite looking horror movies of this year. And even aside from the transgender metaphor, there are other things in there about growing up and changing as a person, where maybe you're trying to fit into the norms that society has built, that I thought was also scary. Like there's a scene in the movie where as an adult he goes back to watch the Pinko Peck and it's nothing like he remembered it. And that scene really hit a chord with me, because I can't tell you how many times I went back to a childhood favorite for then it not to feel like how I originally felt when watching it as a kid. And that's such a sad feeling. And again, I get it, it's not for everybody. I know when I first saw it I was slightly frustrated with the ending of the movie, but after sitting on it for a while, I kind of like what the ending was implying. I'm gonna give I Saw the TV Glow 4.5 pumpkins. Woman of the Hour was a Netflix original horror movie that released this year. It is also actually Anna Kendrick's directorial debut. She stars as Cheryl, a woman who was asked to be part of a dating show back in the 1970s when one of the male contestants on the show was actually a notorious serial killer all along. Now, this movie is actually based on a true story, and there has been a lot of debates and some controversies about the way the movie goes about bending the truth or molding it to kind of fit its narrative. It's a really sensitive thing to mix up the deaths or real life horrifying situations of other people and then mix it around just so it fits your art. And well, for me personally, I think it did work up into a certain point. I kind of like the way the movie went about telling the story, where as the dating game show is happening and you're asking the contestants' questions, we are then flashing back to different years where this real-life serial killer named Rodney Akala was preying on different women and how he went about seducing them, getting them alone to ultimately killing them. And what the movie tries to highlight the most out of the dating game show situation, along with all the other kills that have happened, is how he was able to get away just because it was at a time where women's cries for help weren't taken that seriously. That to me ended up being the scariest part of this movie, because there are so many times this killer could have been caught, could have been put away a long time ago. Some stuff I had to find out outside of the movie that the film didn't even touch upon. The part where I think it does fall flat is when everything is said and done and you know how the story of the serial killer ends. I don't know then if having the talk show being the main center of this story was the right way to go. Even then also, I don't even know if Anna Kendrick's character should have been the main character of this movie. It felt like there were other victims that could have made for a more interesting main character than who was chosen. But I think even the conversations around this movie are interesting, not even for controversial or drama reasons, but really just as a topic of how factual some real life tragedies should be and where does then making art cross the line. So yeah, if you're someone that didn't know much about this, I highly suggest watching the movie, but then also going in and seeing what actually happened and what didn't happen. And how does that make you feel? Because I think there was some facts I learned outside that the movie didn't touch upon that I was like, man, they should have talked about that. Why didn't they? Overall, though, still a really great directorial debut for Anna Kendrick. I'm going to give Woman of the Hour 4 pumpkins. Caddo Lake is a Max original that was produced by M. Night Shyamalan. The movie stars Dylan O'Brien and takes place after an 8-year-old girl mysteriously vanishes. A series of past deaths and disappearances start to link together, forever altering a broken family's history. This is going to be one of those movies where I'm going to be extremely vague on, because the twists and turns and actual reveal of what's happening in this movie blew my mind. And I would expect no less from a movie that has produced by M. Night Shyamalan on it. Not directed, not written, produced. But once you see this movie and everything that it's about, the Shyamalan name really works well with this. Dylan O'Brien, I absolutely love, going back to his Teen Wolf days, and I thought he did a great job in this movie. You really feel for the struggle he has put on through the course of the movie. One of the only drawbacks I will say about this movie is you have to give it time to build up. I was like 20 minutes into this movie and really considering turning it off because I thought it was just going nowhere. Characters didn't seem that interesting. When is this mystery going to kick in? Or is something going to happen? And then once you finally understand what's actually going on, the movie is a non-stop thrill ride, and you will kind of need a pen and paper to keep track of a couple of things because it does get a little confusing, but I think the payoff and everything is so sweet. This is one of those underrated gems of this year. I really liked Caddo Lake. Now, I have seen some people say this has a big similarity to another thing. I'm not going to say the name of the other thing, but I will just say it's a series on Netflix. And well, I'm someone who never saw that series, so something like this I've never seen before. And maybe that's why I was so enthralled and captivated by it. I have seen some people that go, oh, Netflix has already done something like this, so they didn't love the movie that much. I'm going to give Caddo Lake, though, 4.5 pumpkins. Mr. Crocket, one of this year's Halloween entries that Hulu decided to put out. It started out as a short film that now has gotten turned into its own feature-length movie. The movie is about a hyperactive young boy who pushes his mom over the edge by continuously playing an old VHS tape of a children's television host, Mr. Crocket. And I'm gonna tell you straight up, this horror movie I almost made its own separate video for, because the potential and everything involved with Mr. Crocket, I wanted to frickin' love this movie. We're always keeping our eye out for the next horror icon, and the only person in recent years that is seeming to do that is Art the Clown with the Terrifier franchise. But even then, I'm still wondering if there will be another one or if something interesting will come about, and Mr. Crocket had all the ingredients to be that without getting there. This movie is like if you took Mr. Rogers, Five Nights at Freddy's, and Nightmare on Elm Street and combined it all into one movie. Elvis Nolasco, who plays Mr. Crocket, I thought gave kind of a chilling performance. He has this demeanor of being like Mr. Rogers, really nice and sweet to whoever he's talking to, but because he comes from a children's television show, when he comes into the real world outside of the TV, he still retains these almost Looney Tune type cartoon powers, and that made for some really fun kills throughout the movie because it is bloody at times and there's some great practical effects. Mr. Crocket is almost like the reverse Freddy Krueger, where instead of punishing the kids of Elm Street for what the parents did, Mr. Crocket punishes bad parents for hurting their kids. And I feel like that's almost a killer you can get behind, because there's a couple of random situations where Mr. Crocket is going after a dad who would rather spend all day getting drugged up while his daughter is alone in her bedroom just trying to watch TV, and there is something satisfying to see Mr. Crocket take down a bad parent. There's even a moment in the movie where they get into Mr. Crocket's origin, and it feels like a classic horror movie villain story, and there's even a twist to it that I didn't see coming. I was like, this is all there, so where does it fall flat? Unfortunately, there isn't a lot of Mr. Crocket and these kills. You do get one really great one in the beginning and like 2 or 3 throughout the rest of the movie, but there is a lot of in-between time with these other characters that are just not that interesting. Although it's obviously trying to be cheesy and campy, it doesn't fully succeed in that and sometimes comes off feeling cheap. There's this one mom character that figures out how to talk or look at Mr. Crocket through a bunch of VHS tapes, and it gets a little too convoluted and dumb. But man, when I tell you the high points of this movie really gave me a vision for what could possibly happen if they continue this series, make another one, tighten up the story, do a little bit more gags and visuals, this has a lot of potential to be a fun franchise. So I kind of hope they do another one. This first one wasn't all that great, but when you watch it, I think you'll agree there is potential for this to be more. I'm gonna give Mr. Crocket 3 pumpkins. Salem's Lot was a movie a lot of horror fans were waiting to get some sort of release. It was a movie that was filmed pre-pandemic and was just shelved and held onto for so long, looking close to get a theatrical release, but ending up on Max. Based on the Stephen King story, an author returns to his hometown of Jerusalem Lot in search of inspiration for his next book, only to discover that the townspeople are being attacked by a bloodthirsty vampire. And I totally get why there was a lot of interest and people curious about when they could see this movie, because it technically is a remake of a movie that came out in the 70s that some people are really fond of. And now in the modern age with modern tech and everything we could do, it feels like maybe they can properly do this story justice, and it's such a mixed bag. There are things I really liked about this movie and things I felt where it really went flat. Starting off with the things I think it went flat on is one, the look of this movie. I've seen some people praise it, but to me, Salem's Lot is almost a perfect example of modern movies and how I hate the way some of them look. Just scenes where it's supposed to be a shot of a town and a sunset, and it's just clear, obvious green screen lighting. These are not actors standing outside, and it completely takes me away. And this is a mixed part because there's other parts of the movie where it actually does look good. They try to do some stuff with fog and lighting that comes off good, but other moments it'll cut and the movie just does not look great. I also think the first half of this movie is very tedious and not all that interesting. The characters are introduced quickly, not given all that much depth, and probably the biggest downfall of this movie, a lot of the vampire action and things that have gone down is just a little outdated or redundant. Yeah, Salem's Lot and everything it was trying to do was new and interesting back in the 70s, but since then we have had decades of vampire movies with these same tropes of, garlic, wooden stakes, crosses, all that, and just seeing a modern Hollywood movie trying to do those basic vampirisms feels a little outdated. Like, this movie maybe would have been interesting years ago. Still though, getting onto the positive side, I do think at times the movie feels like an extended episode of Goosebumps, and I kind of mean that in a positive way. Because once the halfway mark is over and they've set everything up and now the townspeople are filled with vampires and they have to go about killing them and doing all these different things, then it actually becomes entertaining and fun to watch, where I was actually getting into the movie for a little bit. I did mention how the movie felt like it was just playing on outdated tropes about vampires, but there was one or two things they did do that I was like, oh, I've never seen that in a vampire movie. That was pretty good. And although yes, it has blood at times and people are dying, even kids die in this movie, it was all done in such a censored, silly way that it did feel like a slightly more mature episode of Goosebumps to me. I can totally see why some people would have fun with this movie, but I just didn't like it as much as I wanted to. I'm gonna give Salem's Lot 3 pumpkins. It's What's Inside is a Netflix horror movie that got released dealing with a bunch of friends who are reunited after years of not seeing each other when one of the friends brings a briefcase capable of having the friends switch minds with each other. What starts off as a playful, fun game ends up turning sinister when some people don't want to switch back. What a cool idea for a horror movie. I've seen a lot of people compare this movie to like Talk to Me, and while maybe I can understand some of those comparisons, I feel like this is very different. Just the idea that you could maybe swap places into the body of your best friend, the person you had a crush on, your long lost love, the person who got away, and then the things you could do once you're in that body really made this for such an entertaining watch. Now, the movie does get a little confusing at times because you're trying to keep track of who's inside whose body, but that's almost kind of the fun of it because they really do a good job of setting up these characters' personalities. So even once they switch places, you should be able to see the telltale signs of who they are. There's also something cool that this movie did when doing flashback scenes that I've never seen another movie do that I thought was really funny, but it was the unsettling part of when things get dark and bad stuff happens and then some people do not want to switch places, and just that idea that you could be stuck in someone else's body and that you'll never be inside yours and they can take away your life, your money, your wife, your happiness. I cannot imagine that. I think one of the biggest downfalls of this movie though is its ending. I was not very happy with its ending. If anything, I felt it was a little too harsh on a certain character. Like the outcome of one of them, yeah, I get it, he wasn't a great guy, but the outcome he got did not match how bad of a person he was. I felt like the movie definitely overdid it and just left me with kind of a sour taste in my mouth. But for most of the majority of the movie, I was kind of enjoying it and very entertained. I'm gonna give It's What's Inside 3.5 pumpkins. Bringing me to my final two movies that are for sure ending up on my top 5 list of this year. Strange Darling stars Willa Fitzgerald, who was in the Scream TV series, and Kyle Gallner, who was in Scream 5. Two people who end up on a one-night stand when things spiral out of control, leading to a series of murders. Now, there is so much to love about Strange Darling. This is one of those movies that I heard little rumblings about, so as soon as I heard that, I bought tickets, I went to the theater to go see this, and oh man, I gotta be careful with my words on this because there are things that get revealed that really make this movie a fun surprise. One thing I will say that I wasn't expecting when I went in that I don't think will ruin the experience of the movie for you. The movie is divided into 6 segments, but all 6 of these segments are placed out of order, meaning you could watch part 3 of the movie first, then dive into part 2, go back to part 5, and the movie doing that and playing with what it wants you to know to then revealing what's happening, what's going on, was such a fun ride. Kyle Gallner is one of those people I love to see in horror movies, and I thought he played his character of the demon, that is his name in the movie, and they reveal it right away, was really great, along with Willa Fitzgerald, who played the lady. Her entire performance and what she goes through in this movie really sold it for me. Like, I want to say so many other things about this film, but any other detail could kind of reveal where things are headed with this film. But when everything is said and done and things are put in context, I thought it was one of the better horror movies of this year. Just the way you could go so out of context with everything, and then once you get the final piece of that puzzle, all of it makes sense. It's like the same feeling you got when you would be watching the end of a good Saw movie. You're like, dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun. Strange Darling gets 5 pumpkins for me. The Substance, probably the movie I am most getting comments on the daily to finally talk about. And yeah, I saw this movie weeks ago. I was just unfortunately traveling and doing other things, so I missed the mark to give it its own solo review, but ever since I watched it, I have been dying to talk about it. The movie follows a star by the name of Elizabeth Sparkle, who is now on her 50th birthday, feeling like she is old and getting tossed aside by her job. She is then given entrance to the Substance, a formula that'll create a younger version of her while also still having to maintain her older half. Oh man, what a crazy, disgusting, fantastic movie. One of the things immediately I noticed when watching The Substance, because I had just watched this movie after Terrifier 3, one of the most bloody, gory, and just grossest movies of the year, and I thought nothing was going to top that for me. I made the mistake of watching The Substance at a dine-in theater, and yeah, about 5-10 minutes in, I was no longer hungry. Not even really because of the visuals, but because of the sound design of this movie. This film really amplifies everything you hear. One of the earliest, scariest scenes of this movie is Dennis Quaid eating a bowl of shrimp and the camera zooming in on his lips, his mouth, and everything he's saying. Gross. The score of the movie, I was also a big fan of, really intense and techno, but it's the body horror that Elizabeth Sparkle goes through that once she takes the Substance and gets this younger half who gets to, you know, live the life that she wants, continue being young and beautiful. The only drawback is she can only do it 1 week at a time. In between every other week, she must go back to her 50-year-old body. And you know, me being a couple of months away from turning 30, there were things this movie just put out there that I should not be sympathizing with. Just looking at yourself in the mirror and having your day ruined, not happy with your appearance and the way you look, looking back at younger photos or seeing younger people and just feeling envious and jealous of them. The movie personified that all so well, but you know what else it personified that I got a real big kick out of? Booty. Booty, 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 booty all over this screen. And Corley, forget this director. Any movie you make now, 10 tickets for, baby. Respectfully though, respectfully, but I'm not kidding. There is like so much time dedicated to just full-on booty shots, and I was like, we need more female directors in Hollywood. But I loved how progressively worse things got when the balance wasn't respected in this movie, and how at times it even plays on the fact of getting much older past your 50s and what your body would be like then. Continuously all enhanced with the sound design of bones cracking, skin wrinkling, very smartly done. If I had any drawbacks for The Substances, I am one of the ones that think the last, 10 minutes kind of went a little overboard, that they kind of jumped the shark. I like the Cronenberg side of it and what ended up happening to the main character, but everything that preceded her on stage and how it all went down, the movie was losing me just a little bit in those moments. And also one thing that did bother me in this movie, which I don't think is a spoiler, but they tell you, since there's a balance, 7 days beautiful, 7 days old. The movie constantly reminds you and tells you you are one, respect the balance, which I wanted to believe, but there were times where the younger person didn't have any memories of what the older person was doing, and the older person didn't have any memories of what the young person was doing. And so there was a part of the movie where it was starting to feel like it wasn't following its own rules, and was like, are you actually getting to experience both the old and younger you, or did you just create a younger you clone that you don't get to feel anything? Because if that's the case, then there is no point in taking the Substance, because the whole point is that you get to be young and sexy, but you also didn't have to be old. I felt like the movie wasn't clear on those parts. Maybe that was just me. Aside from that though, really big fan of Substance. Totally get why people are digging it. I highly recommend it. Just I do think it slightly goes overboard at the ending. I'm gonna give The Substance 5 pumpkins. But that is just some of the horror movies I watched in 2024. Let me know what you guys ended up loving the most, what you were most disappointed with. Right now, what are your top 5 horror movies? Let me know down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.